Are there any apologies or substitutions?
None, Chairman.
Thank you. Welcome to everybody who is visiting committee today, and welcome to people that are watching this on the live stream. Just to let you know who's on the top table, I'm the chair, Yvonne Estop, Vice Chair, Councillor Stephen Watson, and then we have the professional planners, Neil Button and Jade Clifton-Brown, the legal advisor, Rani Guturi, then the committee Democratic Services advisor, Peter Mannings, and we have the executive member for planning and growth, Vicky Glover-Ward. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. So we go on to the minutes of the last meeting on the 10th of January. Do members have any comments or amendments to make on the minutes? Could I have somebody to propose that they are an accurate record? Councillor Buckmaster, thank you. And Councillor Devonshire seconded. Can I see all those in favour? And anybody abstaining? Thanks, Councillor Holt. Thank you. So that's the minutes are a record of the last meeting. So we move to planning applications. Well, the planning application for this evening. This is application 3/19/1237 FUL. This is development for 50 dwellings, comprising between 1-bedroom dwellings and 4-bedroom dwellings, including affordable homes. There's a surface water balancing facility, access roads and footpaths, and landscaping. And this is on land between Hazel End Road and Farnham Road, north of Mulberry Avenue, part of St Michael's Hurst development area in Bishop Stortford. So could I ask Jade to present this, please?
Thank you, Chair. The application site is located in the St Michael's Hurst development, which is an allocated housing site on the northern eastern edge of Bishop Stortford. The wider area includes Batwillow Country Park, which was provided by the applicant as part of the wider development, and the Bishop Stortford North development, which is to the west, which has planning permission for 2,200 homes, secondary and primary schools, employment land, and neighbourhood centres. Next slide, please. Following various applications, St Michael's Hurst has planning permission for 479 dwellings, which have either been constructed or are under construction. The development included space for a primary school at the request of Hertfordshire County Council. This space can be seen outlined in red on the map. It's now named Phase E. In 2018, Hertfordshire County Council served notice on the developer, Countryside Properties, to advise that it no longer required the primary school site, as it would be provided on Farnham Road instead. The legal agreement associated with St Michael's Hurst requires a planning application for residential development to be submitted in this circumstance. Next slide, please. Planning permission is therefore sought for 50 new dwellings, including detached, semi-detached, terraced dwellings and a flat block. Proposal also includes 20 affordable dwellings alongside a surface water balancing facility, access roads and footpaths and associated landscaping. This application has been on hold since 2019, whilst the wider development was built out. The scheme has been improved in this time period, following discussions between the applicant and council officers, in particular, Council's Urban Design Officer. Next slide, please. The proposal includes detached, semi-detached, terraced dwellings and a flat block, some of which can be seen here. Next slide, please. Their proposed design includes red or buff brick under tiled roofs with canopies and dormer windows for further visual interest. Next slide, please. It's considered that the proposed dwellings would complement the wider development. Next slide, please. Just another viewpoint there. Next slide, please. The proposed landscaping is also considered to complement the architecture and wider development with proposed trees, lawns, hedgerows, and ornamental planting, as can be seen here. Next slide, please. The Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites. The tilted balance is therefore engaged in the decision-making process. As per paragraph 11D of the NPPF, the application should be approved unless the harm caused by the application significantly and demonstrably outweigh its benefits. In this case, the proposal would provide 50 dwellings within a residential area, including 20 affordable dwellings. It would also create economic benefits during and after the construction period, and would result in an 11% net gain in biodiversity. It is considered that any harm identified within the associated report would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh its benefits, with any harm identified mitigated via conditions or contributions. In addition, the proposed development is considered acceptable with regards to design and the impact upon neighbouring amenity, highways, landscaping, flooding and drainage, climate change and water resources, ecology and biodiversity. The proposal also includes a comprehensive set of SIL-compliant planning obligations to mitigate the impact of the development, totalling over £1.8 million. One objection was received from a neighbouring resident, which has been addressed in the report. No objections have been received from statutory consultees, including County Council's Highways team and the lead local flood authority. The application is therefore considered to be in overall compliance with the relevant policies within the East Herts District Plan, the NPPF and the Neighbourhood Plan. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions and a legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jade. That was very clear. And I'd like to now invite James Delafield, who is here on behalf of the applicant, who is the applicant's agent. And just for members' information, in this case, this is regarded as a strategic site, and so Mr. Delafield is able to speak for up to 6 minutes. So welcome. And so when you're ready, press the button. Thank you.
Good evening, members. My name is James Delafield, and I'm the agent for this application involving Phase E of the St Michael's Hurst development. Thank you for providing me with this opportunity to address you this evening to support the application on behalf of my client, Countryside Properties. The application seeks full planning permission for the development of 50 market and affordable homes on what will be the final phase of delivery on this allocated housing site in the adopted district plan. As noted in your officer's report, this parcel of land was identified in the original outline application as a reserved site for a one-form entry primary school. However, in 2018, the County Council confirmed that it would not require the primary school site, as the education needs of the development will be provided instead by a new larger primary school on Farnham Road. As a result, the Section 106 agreement required Countryside Properties and the County Council to jointly prepare and submit this planning application for residential development. Should this planning permission be granted, Countryside Properties will instead pay the County Council the market residential land value, which can be used towards the development of future school places. Therefore, the proposal in principle entirely accords with obligations placed on the applicant when the original outline consent was granted. Furthermore, this represents an opportunity to deliver an additional 50 homes on vacant land within a very successful housing development that is nearing completion. Through doing so, the proposals achieve an effective use of land and optimise the potential of an existing development site to make an even greater contribution towards meeting housing needs in the district. This is a particularly significant benefit given that the Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. It is also notable and rare for a planning application of this size to receive only one objection from a local resident. Furthermore, the issues raised in the objection relate not to the impact of building an additional 50 dwellings, but to amenity concerns associated with the positioning of the houses on plots 49 and 50. These concerns have been thoroughly addressed by officers in the report, and indeed the positioning of these houses responded to requests from the Council's Urban Design Officer. Concerns of the Town Council are also noted, but we can assure members that the development will be carried out in accordance with the submitted plans and energy statement, with solar PV and EV charging provided to all dwellings. We note that this is also being controlled by the proposed planning conditions. This scheme has evolved through positive pre-application and post-submission discussions held with your planning, urban design and housing officers. and we are delighted to note the conclusions of your officer's report that the scheme is in overall compliance with the development plan. In this case, we would hope that members will agree that it is clear cut that any adverse impacts associated with the proposal are very limited, and they are by no means at a level which could be considered to be significantly and demonstrably outweigh the multiple benefits. The benefits include boosting the supply of housing through the delivery of 30 market and 20 affordable homes, making optimal use of vacant land within an existing housing development, delivering an 11% net gain in biodiversity, incorporating sustainability measures including the use of PV and EV charging, and incorporating modern methods of construction to enhance delivery and reduce the embodied carbon of the scheme, and delivering economic benefits through direct and indirect investment to the local economy during the construction period and beyond. A comprehensive package of Section 106 contributions has been negotiated with officers to meet infrastructure needs, and a draft agreement is with the Council solicitor for review. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak this evening, and then we hope you'll be in a position to approve the application in line with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Delafield. So, members of the committee. Councillor Stowe, Councillor Stowe.
Thank you. Couple of queries I wanted to sort of bring up with you. First of all, unless I missed it, I didn't see any mention about internet cable tweets dwelling. That's the first thing. And would you be kind enough to point out where 49 and 50 are on the drawing? And the third point is from the drawings you've shown us, I can't really see if you've got any garages. If you've got garages, could we look at taking away the development rights to actually turn them into additional rooms? Because that would affect very much the quantity of parking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Please.
Sorry, I jumped ahead there. First question about internet. We wouldn't deal with that at this stage, planning application stage. It'd be dealt with outside. It's not material planning consideration. It doesn't form part of the policy that we'd assess the application against.
Just on the strategic sites, we've always mentioned it. It's always been listed at this stage. And my concern is it's not going to be included. So I want assurance it will be.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The difficulty is because we don't have a district plan policy that specifically requires that specific requirement. We don't have a policy book to pin that requirement on. The NPPF talks about encouraging telecommunications and improving in broadband connections, but it doesn't set a policy for the local area, and so we wouldn't be able to hook that condition at the moment at the time, but it's certainly something that we need to be aware of, and is a very valid point, particularly with a lot of people working away from their offices, working from home, and so it is it's certainly a growing issue, but unfortunately at this current time we don't have that policy that gives us that hook to achieve what you've suggested, unfortunately.
It's correct. It is part of the infrastructure networks of new housing. I wonder whether it might be mentioned in an informative, so that there's a way in which the applicant can be reminded of this. The thing that strikes me is that in the report we hear that the houses show how they can be used for working from home, which is essentially a place for a desk. But you know, how we can't really talk seriously about working from home if there isn't that guaranteed internet access, and so I think it's a fair point. Before we go on, sorry, can I just pick up the other points that Councillor Stowe made? Can we see plots 49 and 50, please?
Sure. Stephen, could you put on slide 16, please? So this is the neighbour who wrote in, and they were talking about this plot here. So their back garden will abut their garden. And only like a very small section would actually be crossing over that sort of boundary line here. There is a strip of landscaping. Do you mind going on to the next slide? So this is it in reality. So this is the neighbour that's wrote in, got a strip of landscaping, and then the dwelling will be positioned just behind that purple border there.
And this is the bus stop.
Yeah.
May I, what you've shown, we can understand why 49 and 50 are placed as they are, because they face a road and they line up with other buildings that have already been done along that road.
So I believe they that the buildings on the left, 49 and 50, were originally orientated towards the entrance road, but following discussions with urban design officer, wanted some focal buildings as you drove in, so it makes it clear that that's the new bit of the development. So they're turned that way.
And then in relation to the objection that is in the report, it was about sunlight, and here it's northwest. Is that correct? It's northwest, so there wouldn't be direct sunlight loss.
No, there shouldn't be, and it is separated by 14 meters, I think, from their side elevation to their rear elevation. And the way it's positioned and angled and set forward, it shouldn't result in detrimental impacts via loss of sunlight.
And the distance away means that, and the obliqueness means that there's not really an impact on outlook, although it is a massive great blank wall.
So the outlook from the neighbours would be either onto their fence, and then beyond that you'd see the garden. If it's looking out of the first floor window, you'd see the garden of number 50. But otherwise, yeah, it's just the same outlook. At the moment, they look out onto the construction site, so it'll be the same as a normal residential outlook.
And the landing window, so your report says there's a landing window,
Yeah.
and that's, we can see that on the floor plans.
Yeah.
That could be clear. There could be a privacy issue because it looks straight into the garden. So could there be a condition about that window?
If members consider that necessary, then yes, there can be, but there shouldn't be a significant overlooking issue. I think it only serves the stairwell. It'll only be a small window anyway.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jade. Does anybody want to say anything else about those particular points? Because then the final one is the garages. and if I could just add to Councillor Stowe's point, the report says, it talks about bike storage, cycle storage, and it says in the report, I mean, this isn't really an issue for you, this is an issue for the designer. It says that garages and sheds will be where you store bikes. Well, there are no garages and there are no sheds in this, and so I wonder if that can be added to the conditions, that details are required of where bike storage will take place.
Yeah, so that been the question from Councillor Stowe was also about the garages, wasn't it? And as I say, there's no need to restrict the permitted development rights on a garage, so that condition wouldn't meet the tests. In terms of the requirement for, or the request for a condition about secure bicycle storage, then we could request the details of that to be submitted, but that could be submitted for approval, and that would require the cycle stores to be located possibly within the demise of the dwellings, within a secure space. That could be a shed, it could be a cycle store, but that detail could be a matter for determination at a condition stage. And the same applies for the flatted elements of this scheme.
Thank you very much. Councillor Copley.
Hi, I do have some other points, but just obviously we're still talking about this at the moment, I presume. Could there be any planting in order to shield the existing resident from that new building? So just some hedges, trees along there, so that they're not looking straight into concrete wall.
But it's outside of the sort of red line boundary. So we've already got the landscaping in between. I know that's low level landscaping. But I think it would probably have to be fairly high landscaping along that border. I'm not sure it's, I see what you
Yeah,
mean,
along
valid point.
the border where they're building, obviously not outside the red line.
Yeah.
But in order the new garden, so that you don't just have the low level landscaping, you do have something. And I'm not suggesting they plant a whole forest, but I'm just thinking, you know, at least one tree might, you know,
Are
shield them
those-
slightly.
Are those existing trees?
Yes, I believe that they're from memory.
I mean, you could just put another one
But
slightly
you-
further along.
Difficulty is with a condition that requires sort of something like a tree planting or a landscape buffer is that that would have to be enforced and monitored, and where it's in a private garden, that would be very difficult to enforce. There's nothing to stop the resident in the development or even the resident in the existing accommodation from putting up their own battery, but there's nothing to it wouldn't be a sort of proportionate response to.
Could that be a suggestion to the developer? They might want to try and help out the existing resident and suggest maybe if they're getting some other trees in for the planting on the estate, that they might want to suggest they could spare one for that resident as well. Not that we could put that on there, but
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
that
suggestion.
I mean, we couldn't stipulate that as a condition, so it is difficult. I
Yeah, I'm
understand
just
the question.
thinking that we
and,
do have
yeah.
representatives here and perhaps they might be listening.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of queries. The first one is on paragraph 6.62. It talks about the design of the units, and it states they can accommodate space to work from home if necessary. But actually, I've looked at the design of, I think, a couple of I think it was Curlew or whatever, and their downstairs rooms are literally one room, an open plan room. And I just felt that that wasn't actually a design that's conducive to working from home, because there was no quiet area. Because if you're working from home and you've got young children, you need a quiet area to better work from home. And equally, it goes back to the point of, broadband to house. If these are going to be considered suitable for working from home, then we do need to think about having an informative about the broadband. My other point was on paragraph 6.61 about they're not considered suitable for the number of people, where a 2-bed unit should be suitable for 4 people, a 3-bed unit suitable for 5, and it states here that this isn't compliant with RSPD. That's a query. And then my last one is about the affordable homes. Now, the affordable homes always used to have to be pepper potted around a development, and these have all been placed in one corner. So I don't feel this is following our district plan.
I think if first of all, the working from home is lip service, and it's a bit disappointing. I think that we are looking in broad terms for houses that are designed a bit different because of the changing culture. And so I think your point is well made, but I doubt if we can do much about this application. But I wonder if officers could pick up your other questions, please.
Yes, so if you mind, I'll just talk about the affordable housing generally. So following discussion with the affordable housing officer, I did have some comments to make, as you'll see from the report. I think they picked up 3 main issues. The first being that there's an over provision of affordable flats across the district generally, and an over provision of, did I say that the right way around? Sorry, an over provision of flats and an under provision of large properties for affordable units. In this case, a meeting was held prior to submission of the A meeting was held prior to the submission of the updated plans, in which the mix was agreed by the council's housing officer, and this did include a reduction in the affordable flats from 10 to 6. So the applicant proceeded on that basis. So when we were then reviewing it, we didn't think it was fair or reasonable for us to justify refusal on that basis. The second is the point that you raised, in that the SPD says that the 2-bedroom properties should have 4 people and the 3-bed should have 5. In this case, we've got 2 beds housing 3 and then the 3 housing 4. But again, when looking at it as a whole, And in the case of a 5-year housing land supply, we have to assess it as to whether those issues outweigh the benefits. And in this case, it's considered that they didn't.
Is it worth coming in and
Yeah,
on
go
some of those points actually, Jade? I mean, the affordable homes is a policy, of course, and it requires those kind of three strands to be fulfilled in order to determine whether that policy can be complied with. In this case, the application is for a 40%, which is a policy compliant level affordable housing. It provides what officers consider to be an acceptable mix of tenures, and so the first two really critical strands of that affordable housing policy have been met. With regard to sort of dwelling sizes, whilst that doesn't follow what the policy preference is for, Jade's pointed out that the mix overall broadly complies with the requirements of the policy, or most of the requirements of the policy. Therefore, in our view, we consider that the development is largely acceptable on that ground, and I think that's an important issue for a project of 50 homes with 20 affordable. So that's a very good sort of level of affordable housing for the scheme with the right types of affordable housing. In terms of the dwelling sizes, they all have to comply with the national described space standards, and all of them do. The council's advice on 2 beds being applicable for 4-person is guidance as well, and so that is something that has to be followed. And so whilst that would be an ideal to have all 2 beds as 4-person units, it isn't always practical to ensure that's the case. And so as long as they meet the minimum national policy standards for 2-person 2-bed 3-person units, and one bed 2-person units, or if it's a studio 1-bed 1-person units, then the degree of compliance is greater. But if it was not providing in accordance with the guidance, that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't comply with the overall planning policy. And so we've done a balanced decision on this one, weighed up the overall provisions and considered that it is acceptable.
Councillor Carter.
Sorry, Chair, and the pepper potting. One last bit of the question
Oh
I
yes,
didn't ask.
sorry, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, appreciate that comment. So I think in this case, they have put the affordable housing next to, if you look at the scheme next door, so the affordable flats are next to, like, mirroring the affordable flats on the other side. And we've got to bear in mind, it is quite a small site to try and pepper pot across. But again, when looking at the overall scheme, it wasn't something that we could justify a refusal on. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think the other thing to say on that is the design is still very much sort of tenure blind, and also this is 50 units within a 429 unit scheme, and so they are pepper potted throughout the wider scheme, and so there just wouldn't be strong planning grounds to resist the pepper potting in this example.
Can I just ask, could you remind us what kind of affordability will those particular units be? Are they affordable rent, or are they first time homes, or what sort of thing are they?
And there's 15 for affordable rent and 5 for shared ownership.
Thank you. It's an important principle, but I think we accept your advice on that. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I did go for a walk around the part that's already been developed of this estate a bit earlier on today. So I see that it's part of a development of about 400 homes altogether. I didn't see, although there was, although obviously there is the country park, which is quite a small area, but for a country park, but it's a nice area. I didn't see any play spaces for children at all. And I know we're losing, there's obviously, originally there was a primary school going to be on this site. So there's no but there won't be any provision for children actually on this site anymore, which is a concern, particularly in view of the sort of campaign of the playing out, importance of children playing outside. There's not also although there's a country park, that's not really a place where you can kick a ball very easily, although it's very good for dog walkers. So I wonder if the needs of children and families have been taken into account sufficiently in this development. So that's one point. I had another couple of points, if you don't mind. I think the biodiversity net gain is mainly provided by the country park area, as I understand it, and I wonder how much the soft landscaping that's going to be provided is also going to be, if you like, nature friendly, because obviously we're in we've seen a lot of, we've lost a lot of our sort of wildlife insect populations. So it's important, if we do have the opportunity to landscape the environment, that's done in such a way as to enhance biodiversity rather than simply for aesthetic reasons and management reasons. And my third point was about external lighting, and this I think is on page 49 in your on the documents here, and it's about sort of the external artificial lighting. I suspect this doesn't refer to street lights. I'm not sure if it refers to street lights or not. So again, the reason for sort of reducing the glare and so on is for human need, if you like. But I would like to see the needs of the wildlife, of insects and so on, being taken into account here, so that because bright white LED lighting, although it's economical, it's harmful to the insect population, and what you should have is more kind of amber, narrow band light, which is less harmful to insect life. So those are my 3 points for the moment.
Do you want to add to that?
I'm probably going to kind of add on to what Councillor Carter said. Just starting off, obviously I'm a ward councillor for Bishop Stortford North, so I do know this area very well, although here obviously I'm talking as a member of DMC. So I did want to pick up on some of those things, because I suppose I'm disappointed in a way. Every time we come here, I do hold my breath to see if it's an application for Bishop Stortford. And 9 times out of 10, I'm actually sat here going, oh, it's another one. So I would like to be seeing a more holistic approach to all of this, taking account of obviously the characteristics of the new residents. But first, starting with the green spaces, because that's what Councillor Carter has been talking about. We are constantly in Bishop Stortford losing green spaces to building. I mean, for example, Cooper's Grange, etc. And I mean, we talked about 11% net gain in the biodiversity, but I'm struggling to see how that happens. I mean, we're getting more people and constantly less and less spaces. I mean, I know behind where I live in Bishop Stortford North, that we've just lost a massive area for the Cooper's Grange development where people used to walk their dogs. There's some trees left, but actually all the wildlife seems to have moved into my garden, which I'm perfectly happy for them to go there. But I do think more consideration needs to be had to biodiversity. And when we're talking about putting in planting, it does seem very much ornamental planting in these areas and not really paying great attention to biodiversity. And also thinking about those additional people moving in. I see that obviously we've given some money towards Hatfield Forest, which I think is right, because I do believe that, you know, families will be moving in and it's the kind of place they want to go. But we do need to be having more investment of that kind of area in Bishop Stortford, because more and more people are flooding out somewhere like that, because we're losing those places vastly. I mean, I don't know what else we could do maybe to add to the biodiversity and the green spaces here. And kind of leading on from that, I know we've talked about in here pathways, cycleways, And I know there were some comments that came back about the state of the roads. But obviously, I'm very keen to make sure that those kind of things do go in, because again, my experience in Bishop Stortford North recently, County Council was meant to be putting in a pathway. They've actually decided they don't want to, well, they've put in an application, planning application, which they decide themselves, that they don't want to do that. So again, I'm very keen to make sure we have clear guidance, the pathways and the cycleways, particularly because thinking about the environmental consequences, but also looking at ensuring these roads. I mean, I don't know whether the roads here are going to be adopted or not. And if they are going to be private roads, I don't know whether it was in here and I've missed it. They want to pick up that we make sure they are to a good standard and they're maintained that way. And we have in place the right people to do that to start with. I know again in Bishop Stortford North we're currently dealing with issues with the community trust that wasn't set up. Also in terms of this section 6.66 and further with the 106 monies, I know that town council, because I'm on that as well, is spending monies in certain ways, and some of the things mentioned there actually overlap. There's going to be certain people who are getting a lot of money in Bishop Stortford and some organisations that are going to get none. So I would like to see there to be some kind of agreement where there's going to be discussion with the town council about where they're spending their money, and it ensures that not the same people get £60,000 and other people get nothing, and particularly taking into account the characteristics of the new residents who are moving in, who I think will be largely families. I mean, I think it would be good to provide some of that money to Grange Paddocks, but I would like to see an improvement of the facilities, for example, things like climbing wall for children and soft play and things like that, so it mirrors what we've got at like Harlow Leisure Centre, rather than just maybe fixing things and you know, fitness studio, which I would have hoped would actually be up to standard already and being fixed rather than further monies coming in from this. Also, I know there's money going to the library. Unfortunately, the library, the building isn't really fit for purpose. So I do understand that the library has got pots of money, and I do think that we should be giving the library money, but that is not going to resolve the issue because they can't spend the money at the moment because the building isn't fit for purpose and they've got nowhere else to go. So more and more people are coming in, but the facilities aren't available. Again, with the GP surgery, I agree that we should give money to GPs, but the biggest issue we have on Stortford North at the moment is South Street Surgery was meant to be moving into a brand new surgery, but unfortunately that hasn't been built because there's a disconnect between Frontier is meant to be building it in terms of what they want for it and what the NHS will pay. So again, that money will not give you more GP places because we've already got a shortage of them, and that additional building isn't being put. Now, I don't know whether anything can be done with this, but I certainly want some kind of thoughts from a planning perspective about what we can do to actually ensure the facilities are in place for people to moving into town, rather than just putting a pot of money and thinking that's going to solve it when it's not. I know you already covered about solar panels that came up from the town council. Schools, again, I know we've particularly put funds towards 2 schools. I would like to check that those are actually the right schools for it to go to, because I know, again, in other parts of Stortford North, some schools have been invested with the money, but they're not actually the schools that people are deciding to go to. So people are wanting to go to the better schools, which is then knocking people out of those schools, and those schools have not got the money. So I don't know what consideration was given when we decided which schools would get the cash. Is it their closeness, or is it, you know, something else? Why are they getting the money? And do we actually believe those are the schools that the people in this new development will go to? Also on existing residents, I'd like to make sure that we don't have like lighting overnight and things. I'm sure in terms of the noise levels, I know, again, from personal experience on the development near me, they've got arc lighting on all through the night. So I just want to make sure that doesn't happen to people here. But overall, I'm not sure what we can do on here. Maybe officers have some ideas, but I do think with the amount of building going on in Bishop Stortford and the amount of green spaces we're taking away, and the fact that we don't have these resources and these funds will not plug those holes, somebody needs to think about this on a wider level. But that's my view. Sorry for the long rant.
Thank you. So we're now going to try and pick those things up before we go on to other points. First of all, can I start with condition number 4 about the lighting? I wonder if officers could look at that, maybe look at the reason for that condition and build into the reason to protect against harmful effects on insect life, so that the designers know how, what reasons they will be specifying lighting for. I don't know if that could be picked up by officers. And then on the same scale of things, the last point that Councillor Copley made was about lighting. I think that means during building work. So while building's going on, no arc lighting shining into people's houses.
Yes, certainly not outside of building hours. I mean, I'm not quite sure why the developers near
So
us
that
have
would be-
chosen to do that.
It'd
But
be
yeah,
part of the condition about the building
mm,
practices during the
that
building
would be
period.
fantastic.
On the lighting condition, and this is a standard wording condition, it doesn't stretch as far as biodiversity, but I think the conditions on biodiversity enhancement, which don't include details of lighting, but that certainly would be an impact that would be considered under the sort of biodiversity lighting elements, as would there's a couple of other conditions that I think would be important. Construction, and what's the other one at the end? The landscape environmental management plan number 19. That is a condition that relates to sort of, the primary reason for the condition is ecological based and landscape based, and so it could include a reference to details of glare if members felt that was an important facet of that condition. I mean, it is a standard condition, but there's no reason why we can't tailor that in this instance. There's also condition 17, which is about the processes during which the development is taking place, and that particularly mentions the direction of security construction lighting away from protection zones, tree canopies. I mean, that's again sort of ecological based wording for justification for the condition. So there are a combination of measures that are secured under the existing wording of condition 17, which is about construction, condition 19 about a post-development scenario about landscape and ecological management, and it's maybe that condition and the biodiversity condition that we could look at accommodating some wording to ensure that details of lighting was taken into account when considering the management of landscaping throughout the course of the lifetime of the development, so beyond construction. The biodiversity net condition that I mentioned is also another opportunity to look at including some wording, but that, I think, the way that it's been set out in condition number 11 is more about measurable biodiversity net gain, and that condition will probably be more appropriate for that use. So I think condition 17 and 19 are the key conditions that will focus on the landscape elements of the impacts that we discussed. And condition 4 is about lighting in terms of human habitation and the impacts that has on residents within the development.
And condition 17, the reason for that already includes, in the interests of existing and future residents, and so there is responsibility on the building contractors to look after the amenity of existing residents in terms of lighting. Thank you. If we go to play spaces, I wonder if we could look at the plan and picking up Councillor Carter's point, and could we start by looking at the proposed balancing pond, because that's surrounded by green space and it's adjacent to other planned green space, and the adjacent green space isn't shown on any plan but that seems to be a starting point in terms of possible play provision within this actual development. And then if we could look at the park space within St Michael's Hurst.
Yes, so Phase E shouldn't be viewed in isolation. It is being form part of the wider development site. There is an open space within the wider site, and I'll pull that map up in a second. Obviously the site's quite constrained, but they have provided that balancing pond that's in the right-hand corner, and they are providing some rustic log seating. Obviously for smaller children, in a balancing pond I see your point. I was sort of relying on the country park, as you mentioned, which is within walking distance from the site. So, go on.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it possible to enlarge this image so that we can see that little park space and the balancing pond larger?
Well, yeah, I haven't got another Zoom in, but
And so this, the balancing pond is covered by a kind of a grey rectangle, which is a bit misleading because it's basically going to be a green area
Yes.
with slopes and things. And then to the south of that is open space. Although that's a bit sort of, that's the most remote part of this area. But then over to the right, there's a line of trees and a cycleway and green space. So this is actually wider than it looks on the plan.
yes. Hang on, if I can find another plan that shows it better.
No, you're okay.
If you go to slide 15. Yeah, that one. This isn't a landscape plan as such, this is showing the pedestrian links, but if you just about see our site up in the right outlined in red, and then to the left you've got a big area of open space in the middle, and then down from the site you've got the entirety of the country park. So yeah, maybe not provision for small younger children, but there is plenty of general recreational space across the wider development.
Yes, I think my point is really that what you've got with those pond areas is you've got unfenced ponds, so that's not a very safe area for children, just particularly for small children to be on their own. So in terms of families, they would need to have a fenced off area where children could perhaps have play equipment and so on.
I wonder if I noticed briefly the landscape comments talked about the gradient of the balancing pond and whether that might be a bit more gentle while it still has its function. But in that green area outside of the balancing pond, could we add another part to the conditions requesting details to be sent in later of play equipment so that we see that green space that's been planned in actually having a play function?
It's possible that you could accommodate some soft, naturalistic play within the area outside of the balancing pond, and details could be included as a condition. I think generally though with this parcel of development that got a piece of the jigsaw with all other parts of this site, they do rely on the open spaces and the play spaces that are provided as part of the wider development, and so there isn't a deficient amount of accessible children's play space as part of the wider development. And so in this instance the application provides some opportunity for small incremental naturalistic soft play equipment potentially within the area, small area next to the balancing pond. That's about as much as it could provide, but as I say, the scheme is acceptable because it slots into the wider master plan scheme, and so it isn't deficient in terms of the access to play equipment generally.
That's
There's
fair
also,
enough, but the applicant hasn't, the designer hasn't made any direct reference to play, and so they're not thinking about it. The green space being proposed is amenity space, but for very young children, having something that is close proximity to homes has an important function. This area could be designed with that in mind. It remains an amenity area, but it can be provided as a children's play area, I think. And then within the larger planned area, it's not clear from this plan or from the report what sort of play provision there is in that area.
Are we asking for a requirement for a condition that requires a children's play area, or are we looking into something else? So we just want to be sort of clear as to what the committee
I think in simple terms, a children's play area, and
Yes, I didn't see on the wider developments I walked around, the bit that's been developed anyway, although there were green spaces, I didn't see any dedicated children's play areas there. So it would be good to have a dedicated children's play area somewhere on this site.
Councillor Hill.
On that point, nobody's actually mentioned the fact that there'll be an awful lot of dog owners in this area, and they're naturally going to use these green areas as dog toilets in the morning, because actually I know that area quite well. It's quite far to actually the nearest park or anything. So would it be wise, instead of having dedicated children area, having segregated children's areas so that dog owners can't actually enter them, and also make sure there's plenty of provision for dog waste bins?
That's a good point. I mean, a lot of children play that's designed has a fence to stop dogs going in, and that's the point of it, really. So I think maybe that would be worth asking for details. Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask, maybe this is in the paper, can't see, does the balancing pond have a fence around it? Because we're talking about families, young children, play equipment. The last thing I want to be seeing is children falling into that balancing pond.
And when does it have water in it?
It is a sort of small balancing pond, and so at the moment there may not be a plan for a fence. We can require details of all fencing as part of a condition. I think we probably could add that. Just want to come back to the question about the play space, if I may, as well, because I don't think we kind of completely bottomed that out. There is play equipment within the wider development, which is part of a 420 odd home development scheme, and so as part of that, the wider development, it would have been designed to mitigate its impact. As part of the development of 50 homes, it is relying on the development for the wider development, and so we probably haven't considered it necessary as part of this part of the development for its own play area, its own dedicated play area for this development alone. If you look at all of the other sort of individual parcels, they don't have their own individual play areas for 50 homes, and so they would have play equipment within the wider area, but not this development alone, and it certainly wouldn't form a reason in our minds to refuse this application. But what I think we could consider is a condition that requires some naturalistic play equipment within the area around or adjacent to the balancing pond, require a condition about fencing, protective fencing. It's not the only location, I think, where this has come up, also in Bishop Stortford. So, you know, it is an issue that we are alive to with these balancing ponds now. And so there is a variety of different treatments of how you make them safe. There isn't generally water in them for most of the time, but for the time when there is water, they often do need some extra equipment to stop young children, particularly from getting in there. But there are a couple of conditions that
Councillor Burt.
Yes, I did. When I was walking around today, there was water in the balancing ponds, in the ponds in the country park, of a level that you wouldn't necessarily want small children to be wandering through. So I'll just make that point.
Councillor Burt.
It's sort of a bit of a general question, really, but it does it's to do with point number 5 on page 49, and it's about if there's any trees or plants that within a 5-year period after planting are removed or die, that they need to be replaced. And I was just wondering who monitors that, or who ensures that happens over the 5-year period. I know it's just we've had a few complaints where I'm a ward councillor that these estates are built, and there's one in particular that a private company is now maintaining it, but not to a very good standard, and we can't seem to do very much about it. Another area is meant to have a wildflower meadow. Now, I mean, I know we are not at the point of wildflowers, but even when we were meant to have wildflowers, it looks absolutely dreadful, to be honest. So I just wonder, how is that monitored? How is that maintained? Who ensures that this would happen? Is it up to the residents or?
It is absolutely and totally up to Countryside Properties, who
Right.
they're developing this, they understand housing, they want to have the best quality, as do all developers. So it's their
Okay.
responsibility. And if there's some failing, and
Mhm.
if somebody points something out, then the council's compliance officer from
They then
from
go,
planning will have a
Mhm.
look, but we rely entirely on the developers to follow through.
right, okay. And then if they don't?
Then the compliance officer might go to inspect,
Mhm.
and might do it with representatives of the developer. Or, if there's a complaint, then a complaint is followed up.
Right, so,
And if it's breached a condition, or if it's not following an approved plan, then the planning officer is able to say you haven't done such and such.
okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Holt?
Thank you, Chair. Regarding, and sorry to go back onto it, but regarding plough equipment, and it was mentioned that there on the wider site that there are places where there's plough equipment, or areas. Do we know exactly where roughly they are on that map? I know it is quite a large site, and you mentioned that they are available, but depending, I suppose, on the location they are. If it was the other side, it might not be so convenient. So it'd be good, especially the other points would be made, to have it in the context of where they would be, and if the current sites are actually feasible for those 50 homes. Thank you.
We can come back to that actually and dig out an answer for you, but we can't answer that straight away. Jay, do you want to fill in on that?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hill?
On the planting, could we put in as advisory that actually the planting schemes may not be wise to plant them at the time you're actually doing the building? I mean, trees are best planted in winter, and you see so often in road developments are planting them in summer and they're all dead by the winter. So actually we put in advisory that you don't have to finish it at the time the houses are finished. You may have to come back and do it at an appropriate time in the season for planting those particular things.
Jade, are you able to answer that?
So I do have an additional question going back
Oh,
to
carry on. Yeah.
Councillor Copley's point and Mr. Holt.
Mhm.
Is there a continual cycle path? Now, I cycle around this area really regularly up Farnham Road, and I've seen this whole area develop over the years. Is there a safe continual cycle path from the north to the south to Avanti Primary School and to all the play areas?
So I'm just trying to think from memory. I think there is if you're coming from St Michael's Hurst, there is a cycle path from memory, and you come down a hill by a roundabout, and then you go up Farnham Road to the primary school. And I from memory, that cycle path is adequate. I think it was another member mentioned county council's footpath, but from St Michael's Hurst, yes, I think you can get from there to there.
There is a cycle path. I never use it
Yeah.
on a road bike, but yeah, I mean, for young children to go, let's say, like a cycle train to bus to school, that is there. On an additional point, and I did hear the frustration, Councillor Copley's, the Paddock Grange Leisure Centre is about 500 metres from here, roughly half a mile. Something like that. Is there a cycle path there? To there from here, this development, when it's totality,
Well,
should have 2,800 houses. How are these people going to motorise themselves from their house to the leisure centre?
There's a real lack of cycling paths, I can tell you.
Well, it is,
next door
well,
at
no,
the
no,
moment,
that-
and the town council is looking at it as a project in order to put in a network. So there isn't, if you want to cycle down with a child to the centre of town, I would not do it. I would not take my 6-year-old
No,
on a
I
bike
mean,
at all.
that's
because-
the very point.
yeah.
People I see cycling.
And in terms of Grange Paddocks as well, don't do it because it is dangerous.
This is the frustration. I share your frustration because I can't think how many schemes we've approved in Bishop Stortford that all have an active transport thing, which is actually just basically put cycle things in, and none of them are connected up. So you're right, nobody cycles between them. But we have
So-
these islands of unused cycle racks.
the plan that we see behind us, the plan on the screen, most of those lines, most of the coloured lines are actually cycleways. There are some cycleways which are exclusive for bikes. Some are on road, but the network of movement in this area is quite good. South of this,
That's in that area. I mean, to get onto that, you
So-
have to come off the main road that comes into Bishop Stortford, which I wouldn't recommend any family to cycle on.
what Councillor Copsley referred to was if you go south of Farnham Road, go onto Rye Street, whether you go, whichever way you go around the school, get onto Rye Street, then there is a planned cycle route that goes from Rye Street all the way through Parkland to the town centre. And that's the scheme that is being designed and being implemented. And in fact, there's money allocated in this proposed Section 106 package specifically for that route. So yes, so outside of this, outside the site and outside of this larger strategy area, there will be a cycle connection.
So just a backup question, is that built with the principles of the actual UK cycling policy that cycle lanes should be direct where you want to go, i.e. directly into town and not around the countryside?
Again, I thought if you
The people that are pressing for that are trying to achieve those objectives. What we see at the moment is quite a few developments like this that have lengths of cycleway built in, but at the edge of development they come to a stop, and so joining them together is a longer term, difficult job that involves working with the county council highway authority. But it's an absolutely good point, and we have to think outside the site when we look at applications like this to make sure that there's connections there.
This is the frustration of sitting in here because we don't see any progress with these things. As you say, they're plans. Plans are just plans until there's concrete on the ground. And if there's no funding, we all know the situation of funding for this. And I don't think cycleways are probably highest. In fact, this is the UK government.
So
back in active transport, so we now spend £1 per head for English population. For Scotland, spend £50.
So
per head.
there's policy and implementation matters to think about outside of this case, but for this application, we can see what's in this site, and we can see what's in the Section 106 agreement, and I think that is taking account of that wider network.
Yeah.
I want to go back.
Yeah, go on.
I want to go back. I want to go back
I
to
know I've
the.
spoken a lot. Can I have
the-
one more? And this is more addressed at the representative developers in your case with
We've got quite a few
biodiversity.
things to get through.
As a welcome pack for all our guests, people that buy the houses, could you not give them a welcome pack of how to make a biodiverse garden
Mhm.
and ban plastic grass?
That's a good suggestion. So I want to go back to some of the things that have been raised. Biodiversity and landscape in terms of a strategic approach, and again in terms of the Section 106 agreement. With all the, so the point is the Section 106 funds, we want them to be directed locally where the impact is felt. We want to be thinking about the population that's going to be in this area. And at the same time, we want to be in line with policy and in line with the two SPDs. We've got two supplementary planning documents. One is about planning obligations and one is about sports and open spaces. And we have to be sure that we're in line with those. But I think in terms of landscape, nature conservation and landscape improvement, in the proposed list of Section 106, we read about Hatfield Forest, but we don't read about Hoggart's Wood, and we don't read about the river landscape. So I think we want to make sure that within the terms of the SPD, the way the Section 106 is worded talks about nature conservation and biodiversity enhancement in this local area. As well as Hatfield Forest, that's fine, but and then with play spaces and sport and leisure, again, going back to this plan, within St Michael's Hurst, I don't know if there are any sports pitches. Is there any formal sport provision, do we know, within St Michael's Hurst? Because if not, then I hope that we can look at the provision in 6.66, which relates to sport. It refers to bowls, gym, pool, but I think we should talk in terms, the terms that are used in the SPD about sports provision or outdoor sports facilities. And if we're going to make reference to anything, it should probably be football, because there is specific reference to shortage of football pitches and the community football club. There's reference to cricket. And in the wording as currently put in the report, it's all about the way that Grange Paddocks might be improved. Well, Grange Paddocks is brand new and doesn't really need to be improved. So if we can keep the wording such that it does address the population that's going to be there and the needs, that would be helpful, I think. Councillor Copley.
If we're going to do it, I'd rather have some more vague wording at this point and then agree to talk to the town council later, because as I said earlier, I know they're considering funding a lot of things. I certainly don't want the wording that's in there at the moment, because we will end up with double cost. And the bit about the football, etc., I think we'll end up with them being paid twice. So can we put that? I don't know whether you need it in here, but can we just agree that more generally in the 106 there'd be some wider wording taking into account the characteristics of the people moving in and discussion with the town council in terms of ensuring that there isn't overlapping funding?
Yeah, I mean, overlapping funding is always a sort of general challenge, I think.
I agree with that, but
I think
discussion.
what the advice that we act on as development management officers is following detailed contact with our Section 106 officer, who has the detail on all of the live projects within the vicinity of each site. And what she does is she goes away and looks at all of the live projects. She looks at in her jurisdiction where the facilities are that need to be improved. She looks at a list of all the facilities that may not need improvement. She has the SPD that we have as a guidance at the moment. We are governed by that SPD. We're governed by what facilities are within the area, and the advice that we receive as DM officers to that is what we act on as a sort of a 106 guidance. So I do need
But expressly says, for example, bowls, and I didn't want to pick on the bowls club because I'm not saying I'm not supportive, but I know they've made an application for £60,000 from the town council. Now, if you're going to give them money as well, and so that's why I'm saying I just want it more vague and considered later.
I mean, that is,
and I'm also not
sure
the demographic.
Sorry, I mean, that is a sort of, I guess that's a town council. The money comes to East Herts, and then the applications get made to the council. It doesn't get made to the planning authority. It gets made to the East Herts, and so that those decisions about where the allocations go is sort of sometimes outside of our.
And that's fine. I'm just saying here it
we're
expressly says that. I didn't want it to be tied to
so
that. That's all I was saying.
What the report is clear about is that you do notice when the county and the district are asking for the same thing, and you've made that point, and you've also made the point clearly in the report that on this occasion you've put to one side the tennis club requests, and so we can see that you are doing that, but with the town council it's probably not necessarily. We don't always know what.
I think this is also a question that has to be considered outside of this application.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fine. I just don't want us to be tied to something here specific.
Yeah.
And then it becomes clear later that isn't. That's all I'm asking.
It has to be specific in order to meet the planning test.
Okay, so we have to put bowls down, even though definitely.
But they're specific to bowls at the Bowls Club. It's specific to the Grange Paddocks, and so we have to tie in a piece of infrastructure to a development. Otherwise, we could say we could fund the development in Harlow, but that's obviously not going to mitigate the impact of this development. And that's why the contributions are picked from.
Okay, well then I'll go with football instead because
football. The SPD doesn't require a contribution towards football specifically, and so that there isn't the the policy guidance that requires it as part of a
Well,
a development
The
scheme. So-
SPD makes specific reference of Bishop Stortford Community Football Club, and
Mm.
we know that they are short of pitches, and we
Yes.
know that they're trying to find a base. So that there's a reference to that, and then going to some of the other things, the NHS money that could be specifically directed at the hoped for relocated surgery in Stortford Fields, which is currently stuck, and this could help unstick it. And in relation to the library, which is specified, it could be there could be a wording that anticipates the library moving. There's a site not a million miles away from the library where, who knows? Sorry, Councillor Buckmaster.
Sorry, can I just come in there, councillor? I have to be very clear with members here that the contributions, they have to be limited to a specific precise project. And so if things change in the future, if we don't know whether a facility is moving, we can't justify a 106 contribution on the grounds of what might happen.
Okay.
And so it has to be a very precise, definite project. And so we know that there is a project coming at the local centre in Bishop Stortford North, and so the money is going to be ring fenced for that. And again, that was part of the consultation with the NHS, and so that is, I think, that's a very important point that we have to sort of urge the committee to take on board, because it may be that there are facilities that we observe as sort of as local residents and think that could do with improvement. But if that isn't sort of tied to a particular policy guidance, it's not there's not evidence to say that we have to justify the size of a contribution. It may not be a project that is currently about to be improved, and so we can't assume that things may or may happen. They have to be very
So
precise.
where is the
projects. So,
GP money going?
it's an NHS contribution, so it goes to the NHS. So,
It just goes straight into the NHS.
and then that goes towards GP provision within the vicinity of the development.
Councillor
Otherwise, it
Buckmaster.
would be not compliant.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, it says the library service, it actually states for its future reprovision. So it actually states
Okay.
in case it moves somewhere else. So quite rightly, it is covered in that point. Can I actually say, I think for the benefit of all the councillors here who are new to the MC, can we have some training on Section 106 money allocation?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Buckmaster. I'll take that request forward. This is, I mean, as you will have noticed, this is the first time we've had an application that's got a sort of a solid, fully comprehensive Section 106 agreement covering all these things. And so this is, I think this is a worthwhile discussion, and we're on our way to understanding things better.
It's also an application that is broadly compliant with the SPD guidelines in terms of the proportion of the contributions. So we haven't made any real reductions apart from like tennis, I think, and then there's some flexibility brought in with how you spend some of the contributions. But as a development itself, it provides a very healthy Section 106 contribution given the scale of development. And so this is a good scheme for the committee to consider, because it follows the right type of guidance, and there isn't any real major compromises that we've had to make in terms of a reduction in contributions or moving contributions away from one piece of infrastructure to another. So this covers the full range of contributions. It covers parks and gardens contributions, community centre contributions, a burial space,
I think
local leisure allotment. So it's a full extensive
I think
comprehensive
we
range. So
we want to acknowledge
but
that
training would be useful. I agree,
we acknowledge that this scheme has you've been able to meet policy. You've met the affordable housing amount in full. I know there's been a little bit of a tilt judgment, but that's to be acknowledged and commended. And the package of 106 contributions, I think, is also to be commended. And so I think what we're talking about is some of the wording so that we can be sure that it is directed where this development has an impact and will serve the population that will come here. And there's a couple of things left. One is the extent of words relating to Grange Paddocks, and whether that could somehow just go back to what the SPD says about outdoor sports provision for Bishop Stortford or for North Stortford even, and the community centre, which I think again could be where we could reference Stortford Fields. Councillor Stowe.
Thank you. I think it's important for perhaps members don't realise, but on these strategic sites, the 106 officer will contact the local council, particularly on things like sports facilities, for ideas of where the money be used, because they can't just give 106 money out and as you said, the NHS goes into the parcel. No, if it's not used, it has to go back. They can't just keep it. It's not a gift of money. It's an allocation of money for a particular purpose. But as councillors, we will be contacted by the 106 office to ask for ideas like sports and what we think is right, and give us some guidelines of where we could give organisations that exist that could need money. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
That I've seen it in where the person it was allocated to said they couldn't match the funding and therefore they weren't going to do it, but the controls around it are very lax, you know, and then it just goes back to the developer. And I mean, I can see that not being abused, but you know, just giving enough money to schemes that are actually going to be too expensive for the people that are receiving it to actually implement. And that's my worry about cycleways. You know, there's quite a significant amount, but cycleways are expensive to build. And I know how little money we have. So where's it going to come from? You know?
Councillor Dunlop.
Thank you. I was just wondering, are there any trigger points for the 106 money? I can see a list of them, but I normally would have expected to see trigger points regarding the contribution being available to people. That's question one. I've got a few more. I'll let you answer that one first though.
There will be trigger points in the section 106, just not listed them in my report, but it'll be confirmed when we actually undertake the legal agreement that the wording and the trigger points will be agreed with the section 106 officer as well.
Are we able to determine tonight based on the fact there aren't any? It's just my limited experience is it's rather nuclear in that it's Gilston, so there were many trigger points
I think
all around that. And
I think if there was a specific thing that we wanted to suggest, we could ask officers to go away and take that away beyond
right
after our decision, as it were.
Okay. And possibly on another sort of almost the same vein, but the solar panels, I noticed that condition 12 is prior to first occupation, that we will determine what solar panels are going on roofs and so on. Whereas, and we will give our agreement to that. I'm suggesting that condition 12 moves to be a prior to any ground construction works rather than prior to first occupancy. Prior to first occupancy, you've already built the solar panels, so there's a lot more at stake for everybody. If you put it before any construction works have happened, then it's easier to negotiate, as it were. I too went to the site today and had a look around there, and it's obvious that there's no cycling going on there at all because there's no bicycles. It's quite simple. There's no cycling. The 106 money that we asked for cycling infrastructure, which we then removed because the county council had similarly asked for the money. Have they received that money already, or would that is that still to come?
Sorry, I don't know whether they've received that money. I would presume they would await this planning application to be.
So is there a danger that nobody gets the money because they don't get it and we don't get it because we thought they were getting it?
If there's a requirement for a payment at a certain trigger point, then it would be up to the developer to make the payment. If they miss that payment date, we would monitor the payment of all contributions.
But
if they don't receive something, then we would chase that up because the money would pay to us in the East Arts councils, but because they have a separate 106 agreement with counties, and so the county side will monitor their side of the agreement. There's a monitoring cost that is attributed to all both the county's 106 agreement and East Herts County East Herts section 106 agreement, and so there's monitoring of both agreements and for both councils to ensure that that happens.
So if it did drop out of county, then we would just step in and pick it up.
So I think if money that's in the 106 agreement for use by the county council tends to scoop that up very quickly and holds that money, and then the way that money is used means other people have to go to county. It has to be very clear in our decision what that money is for.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that it follows through and is used.
Okay. And the solar panel.
The solar panels. So the condition 12 is prior to the first occupation, the details of all the photovoltaic panels. And this is based on the sustainability strategy. So there's an energy sustainability strategy, as far as I understand, and that says to what extent it relies on the panels. And then this asks for details of the panels. Could it be moved to before a different trigger point?
Prior to any ground construction works rather than first occupancy.
So I decided on that prior to first occupation purely because we're looking at sort of the eastern neighbourhood, which we've been dealing with. We have been adding it on as prior to occupation condition, and I found that when it's come in, the urban design officer and any of the other officers that seem to raise an issue and aren't, to be honest, that fussed, whether it's prior to commencement or whether it's prior to first occupation. It just seems like people know what solar panels look like and their function. So it's not particularly necessary, reasonable for it to be prior to commencement in this circumstance.
I wonder
So
whether
in that basis, then surely it would be easy for it to be prior to construction work start.
unless number 12 is changed a little bit so that full details are provided, submitted to, approved in writing and installed. So if we were able to add installation before occupation of that, I mean, I don't know, it would just need a bit of different wording to make sure they're actually done.
I mean, we could consider moving the wording to the details could be submitted prior to the relevant part of the building. So if they were constructing the roof of the building, then one would be reasonably expecting that would be a sensible time to require the details to be submitted. So even though it's later than construction, it's earlier than occupation, and there's still work to be done, and it means they couldn't do any further work on those parts of the building until they provided that detail and we'd discharge that information.
And the other point, the point about cycling is we know that a network is being provided, it's not finished yet. And we know that, so outside of this committee, the culture has to change, and that's something that we just have to wait and we use other means to do. Councillor Hill.
Right. Are the cycling lanes there shared use cycling lanes for pedestrians and cycles?
Some of them.
They don't get used. Right? I mean, you think of all the people walking their kids to school there and you're trying to cycle down it. It's just an accident waiting to happen. You need dedicated cycle lanes to be used.
Some of them are. Some are dedicated for cycles
There's
only.
no point in
some
having
shared.
some dedicated. I mean, it's like having half a motorway and then a B road. It doesn't work. You need dedicated cycle lanes. And I mean, it's not my opinion. Look at London with their super highways. They've increased cycling by about a huge, significant amount in London.
The Highway Authority have guidance. They've got this guidance on specification of cycle design and
Yeah, I've read
specification of routes, and so they follow that, which is the
It's
best.
160 pages long. I've read it.
As far as we're concerned in this committee, we can't do any more. We rely on that Highway Authority and the guidance that they use. We make sure that development is connected, and we make sure that there are alternatives to the car as far as we can within the scope of the planning.
But then, I mean, and I don't wish to labour the point. You're just wasting your money. You may as well spend it on something else because, as you point out, they're empty. And if you're building something that's not used, what's the point in throwing money at it? I'd rather throw it at a doctor's surgery.
Well, I hope that we'll carry on building the cycle network in Stortford and get a change in travel habits. Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. I think you said earlier there's no garages on this site. You can't actually tell because all the plans are just roof plans. I understand these days people don't really use a garage to park a car in, but they do use it for other things, for storage. And that's my slight concern. There isn't much storage on these properties. It's just something I've noticed. Thank you.
Is there anything you can say?
I think just looking at the national space standards, it includes storage space within the dwelling, and that's what we are basing it off, to be completely honest with you. I completely see your point, but if I'm basing it off of the standards and the scheme as a whole, it's a minor point in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, sorry, I'm talking about it, the storage of cycles. I think we mentioned earlier, and things like lawnmowers. Where do you put a lawnmower? You can't store inside the house, really.
Yeah, the only outside the houses, so the houses are meeting space standards. Outside the houses, the only other building is a bin and cycle store for the flats, but none of the houses have sheds or garages shown, and so then it becomes more difficult in terms of that outdoor storage. I think at the very least we should include in the condition details of secure cycle storage if we're taking seriously cycling as an alternative.
On Councillor Devonshire's point, would they consider putting in a library of things so people didn't need to buy lawnmowers and other items? In flats, you're very limited space, and these houses you're very limited. Why have 550 houses that need lawnmowers when you can have one that you can share?
I mean, again, it's like a community development thing, isn't it? There's going to be, for Stortford Fields, I don't know whether it extends up here, but there's going to be a community trust that looks after public spaces and buildings, and that's the sort of initiative that they could be encouraged to do, because that's a good idea.
Could that thing be added to the guidance we give to people so it's more out there at the start of a development? Because you also have to build it into development. Somebody has to look at, you need to get, you're right, you need the community to come together to do it and embed it. But if it saves me spending a lot of money, I mean, I don't know about people here, I have a library of things in my garage that I use very infrequently. And if everyone replicates that, it's bad for the planet, and B, it costs everyone a fortune, which you don't need to spend. You can spend that money on holidays or something else.
I think we should encourage residents and groups to initiate these ideas and sort of like make a plan, and then we can say, oh, let's support that plan.
We can only influence at that point.
Yeah.
I do have one more specific question. It's about roadways and cars and garages. Right. Is there, when you're planning roadways, a standard car size? Because cars are getting bigger and bigger. Are we taking that into account when we look at the size of roads? Because, and I say this from work, the biggest request we now get at work is, can we have bigger parking spaces for massive SUVs?
I mean, I don't specifically look at that exact matter, but we rely on the county council, and they do have their own widths that need to be adhered to, and parking spaces need to be the correct sizes. And over the years, they've definitely got bigger to accommodate larger vehicles.
Just to highlight, but I had seen people climb in the back of their cars in multi-stories now because they can't actually get in the doors.
Yeah.
Councillor Watson.
I mean, can I bring up the point about the curbside parking? I note that there's a slight deficit in the parking allocation, and what problem would result from curbside and even pavement? Well, we know what problem pavement parking would be. We've got all those pathways that are meant to be able to use the pavements in many circumstances, but are the roads able to cope with curbside parking in that development?
I mean, no curbside parking happens. This scheme is providing quite a high level of parking. I think we've applied the 5% discount to parking, which has been applied across the wider development, seem reasonable to do the same here. But yes, the road should be wide enough to accommodate roadside parking. There's visitor parking spaces as well if needs be, which should alleviate that to some extent.
Go on, Councillor Watson.
I mean, does that compromise the cycle network somewhat if there's some of those routes require the roads to be clear in both directions for them to function as cycle routes? So.
Yeah, I see your point, but I think we're getting out of the realms of this sort of application in itself. We do go off to the County Council highways, and they haven't raised any objection in this case.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. My other question was really about the long-term, I think it has been raised by other people as well, but what's the long-term maintenance plan for the roads and the pavements and the green space?
I think I have to say that that's not something that is within the realm of this application. So roads are maintained by the local highway authority, and we can't put anything in this planning application decision.
Could I just sort of clarify with you? So any roads on this development will be adopted by the HCC and maintained by HCC, is that right? Or is that or is it up to the HCC whether it wants to adopt the roads?
Yes, we don't, that's not, whether they're adopted or not is not part of the planning application. We just have that network. It's up to the developer working with the highway authority about whether roads are built and then adopted and maintenance paid for. But that's outside of our scope. If I could make a couple of questions about condition number 13. And first of all, the parking, if we could have a look at the plan of the site again, please. All of the parking is surface parking. Some of these are sort of fairly substantial blocks of paving, and so the first point is I don't know whether all hard landscaping materials, that's included in number 13. Where those parking areas occur, there will almost certainly be hedges or fences or walls around them, and I wonder if we could add into condition 13 details of hedges, walls and fences, because if those areas are enclosed, those walls or fences will have a big impact on the appearance of the development.
13 includes detail of the
boundary
paving and
treatments.
edging treatment as well, so we can keep that as it is, I think.
Oh yes, it says and boundary treatments, including fences, walls and bollards. So as long as that's clear that it's not just boundaries between each property, it's also any fences or walls or landscape that goes around these parking areas, because these parking areas are within plots.
Yeah, it could also include that requirement for the fence around the balancing pond as well, if we want to be specific on that.
And the other point about condition 13 is waste and refuse. Your report talks about that, and the refuse service has said they're okay with it, but the proposal's got makes no provision at all for where bins will be stored, and that means they'll be all over the pavement, along with some cars probably. But no, the bins, if there is nowhere where the bins naturally go, then they'll just be all over the place. And so I'd like, if possible, to see if we could add to condition 13 details of bin storage locations and bin enclosures.
I think we could add in about bin storage locations, but I think we have to be reasonable and think about it being part of the wider development, which I think they just, from admittedly, I've not been there on bin day, but I think they just store them down the side of the dwellings, and then wheel them out to the front, which is
Yeah.
somewhat normal practice for a residential area.
I agree. Alongside nearly every house here is their parking space. And so the bin's not going to stay in the same place if it's on the parking space. It's going to be, sometimes it's going to be shoved at the back, but mainly they'll be left where the bin people leave them at the front, unless there's a slot where it naturally goes. The Section 106 agreement pays the refuse service about 3,500 or something for the bins. So the bins are being provided, but in a housing development, I mean, so many, we go around the country and a lot of new housing developments have got bins scattered all over the place. And so, you know, it's something that if we can control that a little bit, then let's try and do that.
On a point of clarity, there is not just the cyclists that impacts, it impacts the old mothers with prams, people in the SEND group who can't access a school. It's actually quite a serious issue. It's not a trivial issue at all.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Page 44.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so this is, so I've been pointed out that this is part of the report. Waste storage is to be kept on plot and brought to the front of the houses or within retrieval distance of collection vehicles. And then the rest of it is about turning heads. So that's the practice. That is actually, that's the advice that the refuse service has given, and they're advising good practice for the residents. So sorts of things that Councillor Hill's been suggesting. I would suggest that's not quite enough, and there has to be something physically designed in for bins in the interest of the quality of the development and the residential environment.
Where the bins would be installed internally within the property itself, or outside in the back garden or at the side, the only thing I think I can suggest is that we have as Jade has suggested, is to have a condition that requires the location of the bins, but the design themselves, it's up to the resident how they want to store their own bin, I suppose. If it's the location is in the rear garden, it wouldn't be a planning consideration, because it would be for the private resident to decide. And also, as we've sort of underlined that the waste officer has not required that detail as part of this application. Where you had no option of storage internally within an apartment or within a dwelling, you may have stores that address the street frontage, and in that circumstance it would have a visual amenity impact, and therefore there may be a requirement for the detailed design of a bin storage enclosure to be submitted as a detail. But as this application has had some advice from the waste management team, who are comfortable with the waste collection arrangement, but for the councillors, if they need a requirement or if they want to know comfort on the location of those stores, we can perhaps condition the location of the bin stores and go with that. But it isn't going to provide that visual requirement that you're seeking.
That would be very helpful. Thank you. Bins and bikes and cars and storage, they're all space requirements. So if we're designing houses for living for many, many years, these are all things that makes a house work. And so we give a lot of attention to kitchens and living rooms and bathrooms, and we give a lot of attention to cars. But these other things like storage, Councillor Devonshire has mentioned, and the bins, they are space requirements which need to be planned in. So, members, Councillor Stone.
With the few amendments we've spoken about this evening, I propose we accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. So I think those few amendments I'm sure you've kept track, but if I could just make reference to plot 50, landing window, condition, condition 13, I think it is, bike storage, and clarity about the fences and boundary treatments. The condition 17 relating to the building contractors practice and the effect of and avoiding lighting affecting amenity. The condition about lighting to make clear that we are avoiding harm to insects. And then condition 12, we're seeking to ensure that the condition ensures that the panels are installed as well as having the details approved by a reasonable trigger point. And then in addition, adjustments to the wording of the section 106 agreement to make it very clear where the money is directed in accordance with the SPD and in relation to the impact of the development and the future population. Are there any others, Councillor Devonshire?
You mentioned fencing, but can we add in, you mentioned it before, fencing around the balancing pond, please?
And oh yes, so the and play, so so details to be submitted of play, naturalistic play equipment within a fenced area within the green space. And Councillor Devonshire?
Yeah, with all those amendments, I'm happy to second the proposal.
So trying to find the recommendation. Here we are. So members, the recommendation is that planning permission is granted subject to a legal agreement and the draft and the conditions and reasons set out in the report with the addition of those things just mentioned. Can I see those in favour? So that's everybody. That's unanimous. Thank you. That means that planning permission is granted for 50 new homes at St Michael's Hurst with associated access roads, landscaping and play. Thank you very much. We go on to the next item. Item 6, first of all, we have a list of appeals submitted against refusal or for non-determination. This is for us to note, but are there any comments anybody has about that list? Then part B is a list of the planning appeals lodged and the decisions. I think we do need to acknowledge and thank planning staff for the work that is involved in appeals. It's deep and complicated work, whatever the result. And sometimes it involves defending applications for costs as well, as we see in this set. And then we have we have inquiry and informal hearing dates. And then finally, the statistics of performance of application times, major and minor applications. So we note all those. Thank you, officers. Then Item 7 is urgent business, and Neil.
Thank you, councillors. I've been sort of asked, unfortunately, because Sarah couldn't be here this evening, Sarah Saunders, she wanted me to pass on a message in respect of recent lobbying of councillors relating to the Gilston application. So Sarah's asked me to sort of present a brief note, and that's officers have noted through the recent lobbying of DMC members relating to the Gilston planning applications that were considered by Development Management Committee last February and March, is being suggested that the resolution to grant added the provision that officers to report back about the developments in 12 months' time. I've been asked to clarify that the resolution from February and March related specifically to reporting back on the monitoring of the development, and it wasn't to present the scheme back to the planning committee. And not the outline planning applications, and so it's specifically for the monitoring of the development. And the matter is sitting with Sarah Saunders as the head of planning and building control. She is currently considering how and when to report on the monitoring of the development, given that the Section 106 agreement is yet to be completed, and the monitoring framework, which is in the process of being drafted by officers, this will need to be agreed by the executive. Once there is more clarity on the timescales of that monitoring framework, an update to the DMC will be provided in accordance with that provision. Sarah's also asked to remind me that to remind councillors that if they've got any particular questions, they can direct them separately to Sarah after this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Dunlop.
I appreciate your passing on the message, but just for the record, I'd just like to try and clarify, will we get a report within the 1 year as minuted?
As I say, that's a question for Sarah to answer on the timing for when the monitoring will come back, and that work is in progress. So that's all the information that I have for this committee at this current time.
I just love that. I think that monitoring is needed at the moment because there's considerable works already started on the land. So some monitoring would be good.
Thank you, Councillor Dunlop. So that's noted. Thank you, all members. That's the close of the meeting at 8:47. Enjoy the rest of the evening.